You know, in the world of high-stakes politics, words are everything. But what happens when the language suddenly changes, when talk of partnership gets replaced by the language of pure power? Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating analysis of the strategic dynamic between Donald Trump and Canada and how it seems to have completely rewritten the rulebook.
I mean, just think about this question for a second. It's the central question of the analysis we're looking at. It kind of forces you to grapple with a new reality where all the old assumptions, all the things we took for granted about how countries deal with each other are suddenly up in the air.
And this right here, this is the core of it all. It's not just a simple disagreement over policy. No, this is a massive shift in how power itself is being defined. We're talking about a move away from a shared vocabulary of cooperation to a whole new dictionary of control.
All right, so let's get into it. What does this new language of power actually sound like? Let's break down the strategic thinking that the source suggests is behind Donald Trump's rhetoric. You know, the source we're looking at brings up a really key idea, pulling from Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. It's that old saying, when someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. The argument here is that maybe, just maybe, we should take Donald Trump's words literally, not just as political theater. Okay, so how do a few statements suddenly become a grand strategy? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The analysis argues that what might look like random, off-the-cuff remarks are actually part of a much larger, deliberate pattern. See, the point is that power doesn't just show up one day with an army. No, it kind of hints at what it's going to do first. It lays out a blueprint, piece by piece, in the words it chooses, long before it takes action. And here are some of those pieces of the blueprint. You know, on their own, you might just shrug one of these off. But the source argues that when you put them all together, a very clear picture starts to form. It's a picture where other countries aren't seen as partners, but as potential assets to be acquired. This is such a classic power play, something straight out of the strategy books. You take a concept that everybody knows, like the Monroe Doctrine, and you just twist its meaning. The source points out how it gets reframed from being about protecting the Americas from outsiders to being about America possessing the Americas. It's a pretty bold move. According to this analysis, the situation with Venezuela was the moment the mask came off. The rhetoric wasn't about liberation or helping out. It was framed much more like a corporate acquisition. And that, the source argues, sent a very clear signal to everyone else watching. So if you're Canada and all of this is happening right on your doorstep, what do? Well, the analysis points to a fascinating shift. A move from a state of, wait, is this really happening? To, okay, let's get ready. And this chart just lays out the contrast so clearly. You've got Donald Trump's approach on one side, described as loud, fast, and focused on intimidation. And then you have Canada's approach, quiet, patient, and all about building strong, lasting alliances. It's like two completely different games being played on the same board. The analysis brings us back to the 48 Laws of Power again, highlighting one of its biggest lessons. Going it alone is a fatal mistake. So the question becomes, could this belief that you don't really need allies, could that be the biggest strategic weakness of all? The thinking is that isolating yourself just makes you an easier target for everyone else. So instead of getting into a shouting match, Canada's response is described as being super methodical. It's a four-step process, really. First, just listen and watch carefully. Then, make your friendships and alliances even stronger. Third, make sure you're not overly dependent on any one source for critical needs. And finally, prepare. Prepare for survival. And this right here might be one of the most crucial points in the entire analysis. It's the idea of misreading politeness. The source argues an aggressor might see Canada's polite culture and think it's a sign of weakness. But that's a huge miscalculation. It's not weakness, it's discipline. It's a cultural style, not a sign that they'll just back down. And that all leads to this quote, which really nails the huge psychological shift described in the source material. The mindset changes from just hoping for peace, or taking it for granted, to understanding that peace has to be actively maintained and defended. It has to be preserved by being ready. And here's the ultimate irony of the whole situation, isn't it? The very actions that were meant to intimidate and divide have apparently had the complete opposite effect. According to this analysis, in an attempt to dominate, Donald Trump has actually unified and strengthened the very opposition he was trying to break. This quote really just sums it all up perfectly.
It's almost like a law of physics for politics. When you push too hard in one direction, you create an equal and opposite pushback. Overplaying your hand is one of the fastest ways to lose the game. So, where does all this leave us? The analysis closes with this really sharp, thought-provoking question. In this massive geopolitical chess match, what ultimately wins? Is it the person who speaks the loudest and makes the biggest threats? Or is it the one who truly, deeply understands the subtle art of strategy? The game, it seems, is far from over.